Welcome into pre-draft coverage of the heist of the FantasyPros Championship Hardway Draft live on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network. We are less than 2 hours away from one of the most anticipated drafts of the season. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome, and thanks for tuning in an hour early on the Better Sports Network. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. I'm at Eric Balkman on X. My name is Eric Balkman. You, of course, know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Slowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the Fantasy Football Players Championship. So basically what we're looking at tonight is a draft that has been going on for several years, and it features some of the most talented players in the high stakes industry. We are going to have Abib Agbatoba, a back-to-back overall Football Guys Players Championship drafter tonight. Austin Martin, one of the legends with FFPC Dynasty, a guy who won a $500,000 grand prize in the FFPC Playoff Challenge. Davis Maddock, who you know from Sports Grid, he's going to be joining this draft tonight. He'll be drafting live. The Go Bills franchise, Dom Barnani, Nick Costantino, who's celebrating a birthday today, they're going to be drafting tonight. And of course, we'll also have Theo Greminger from Player Profiler will be drafting. John Daigle, Darren Armani, they're going to be on the show later on tonight. Noah Riddell is going to be drafting in this. We're also looking at Todd Burrows, who's going to be coming on later. And then Mike Shope and Adam Krautwurst from the Deep End Fantasy Football Podcast, and teaming up with Bradley Stalder from Player Profiler is tonight's first guest on the show tonight. You follow him on the X at Overhyped Sleeper, a guy who has won more FFPC leagues over the years than I care to recognize or count because they are numerous. Dan Williamson from Player Profiler leading things off tonight. Dan, welcome back onto the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, man.
Thanks, Balky. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited for tonight's draft. I mean, anytime you're going up against a list of people like that, you better bring your A game and you better be fired up and psyched up about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is fun, and it's called the hard way because if you want to win $1 million in the Fantasy Pros Championship, this is literally the hardest way to do it, is drafting against these 11 other teams tonight. Dan is kicking off our pregame coverage. Once again, that draft will go live. You can actually watch it right here on the Better Sports Network as Aiden LaCorey and Dave Terpoli from the FFPC will have live pick-by-pick coverage for you this evening. That kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Coming up on tonight's show, Dan Williamson and I are going to chop it up for the first half hour. Coming up at the bottom of the first hour, John Daigle from Establish the Run is going to join me. He's drafting tonight as well, so we'll talk a little bit about his strategy. And then to kick things off in hour number 2, Darren Armani from Fantasy Mojo, at Fantasy Mojo, the godfather of the Pros vs. Joes Championship. He is going to join us, and then Todd Burrows will wrap things up as we lead into live pick-by-pick coverage. Todd Burrows from Sharp Football Analysis. The Fantasy Pros Championship is obviously live because these guys are drafting for $1 million tonight. You can draft for $1 million too in this same competition, a $1 million grand prize within a $6 million prize pool. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. The Best Ball Tournament is also popping off there, as well as the Superflex Best Ball Tournament. If you want to join either of those, go to MyFFPC.com or simply scan the QR code that is conveniently placed on the screen by our producer, Matt Deutsch, tonight. $125 will get you in the running for a $300,000 grand prize. Don't forget about the Empire Leagues and the Dynasty Startups, Empire Dynasty Leagues and the Dynasty Startups Leagues that we have over at myffpc.com. Sign up for those with that QR code on the screen. And I also want to mention that the FFPC main event early bird ends at midnight Pacific time tomorrow. What does that mean? Well, if you register your FFPC main event teams by scanning that QR code on the screen right now, you will receive $100 off your first team. Plus, you will be entered in to playing in the FFPC Pros vs. Joes Championship. 84 teams will be in that, 42 Joes, 42 Pros, and the winner of each of those 7 leagues will win a free entry into the 2025 FFPC main event, where you will compete for $1 million grand prize for free. You can turn nothing into something there. So register now, myffpc.com, or simply scan the QR code. Dan, refresh my memory. Are you the defending champ, or did you win the Pros vs. Joes before?
Yes, 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, last year I did not. We ran into a little bit of injury problems, and so it just didn't work out. But 2 years ago, yeah, I won the overall out of 72.
I'm telling you, this is what makes the hard way great. You get the heaviest of hitters tonight. Dan, let's get into the actual content for the show tonight. And if you want to frame any of these as far as how you think they're going to be drafted in the hard way. I would imagine a lot of these guys are going to be pushed up because people will be trying to get their guys in this draft. Let's talk about the Detroit Lions running back situation. We have seen, we saw last year, obviously, the ascent of Jahmyr Gibbs as a rookie. He was phenomenal. He was awesome. He was everything we thought he would be and much more. Now, that is reflected in the ADP as we go to Fantasy Mojo tonight and we find out where these players are going over the last 5 days in this Fantasy Pros Championship. We discovered that there is a pretty big disparity between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Gibbs is the running back 4. He is a first-round pick going at 110. And then you're looking at David Montgomery at the 703 as running back 23. Now, that is, I mean, you're looking at, what, 5.5, almost 5.5 rounds of difference there. You are going to be picking at the 2 spot tonight. I don't think you'll be taking Gibbs there. You probably want to have a shot at him in the second round. But as far as any other draft goes, who is the best value at cost? Is it Gibbs in the first or is it Montgomery in the seventh?
Oh, sorry. Of course, I do not.
Right.
Silence my phone.
That's how it always works. Like right when you're ready to talk, then all of a sudden the phone rings. Happened to me on my earlier show today. It happens.
Yeah, so I'm doing my best to provide great radio here. But to answer your question, I'm definitely in on Gibbs at his price because, you know, we're looking, I think, at a pretty safe floor along with really nice upside, which is what you want to get in the first round. So liking Gibbs where he's going, not afraid to take him in the back end of the first round. If he drops to the, early second round, definitely happy to take him there. David Montgomery, I really haven't drafted too much of, and I don't think I will be drafting much of him because what we're looking at here is, number one, I think we can probably assume that Gibbs is going to be getting a little bit more of the workload because as the season went along last year, that's exactly what we saw. It's his second year. Now he knows how to prepare his body. He's more in tune with the offense, everything you want to see. So I see Montgomery's role shrinking rather than growing, though I do still think he's going to have a regular role. I mean, Gibbs is not the kind of guy you want to overuse, but I think Montgomery's probably going to get those more empty touches other than probably some goal line work, but with Gibbs also being good at the goal line, I think that's going to be split. So, I think you will ding Gibbs a little bit, but I don't think Montgomery's going to have enough standalone value.
Yeah, we're off and running here, and the YouTube chat is obviously firing off here. Ray Chung, a guy who is he's been a guest on many of my shows, longtime FFPC player. Somebody is clearly prank calling you, Dan, is what he said.
Yeah,
somebody who's watching.
No doubt.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm working on that now.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Mile High Luke also says hi. Hello. What's up, Mile High Luke? I appreciate that. And then Dom Guzzetti actually pointing this out too. Dan Williamson again. Weren't you on with Aiden and Turp, drafting with Turp? You were, Dan. You were just on a live stream drafting a team with Turp. Now, was that Fantasy Pros or was that the FFPC Best Ball tournament?
No, that was the Best Ball tournament.
That was Best Ball. Okay.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that. I'm sure we'll reprise it at least one more time this year. Really enjoyed drafting with Turp. He's a lot of fun.
He is a lot of fun. He'll be covering the draft live, pick by pick, at 8 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Let's talk about the Patriots running back situation. Antonio Gibson, I was just talking with Brandon Murchison from Rotoballer on this show last week, and he was talking about he just cannot quit Antonio Gibson for some reason. But now Gibson goes to New England, where they already have a bona fide, again, a 3-down running back there in Rhamondre Stevenson. He's already demonstrated those skills. This year, as far as the ADP goes, again, pretty big disparity, although these guys are going much lower than the Detroit running backs. You're looking at Stevenson as running back 21 at the end of the 6th round, Antonio Gibson in the mid-12th round as running back 49. Dan, there's going to be people buying the bump on Stevenson this year. However, Gibson does throw a monkey wrench into the plans for Stevenson owners. How big is that monkey wrench going to be?
Yeah, that's potentially a pretty big monkey wrench. Originally, I was hoping that what would happen with Stevenson is they would draft a banger, kind of a more 2-down banger, maybe somebody on the goal line, something like that, who would be taking off a lot of those touches from Stevenson so he could operate more in the passing game, and still get some goal line work himself. What we got is Gibson, who is really a very good receiver, but he's managed to lose the job pretty much every year for the past 2 years. But that was in Washington, different coaching staff, and we're looking at a very different coaching staff here in New England too. There's not really a lot of continuity. So I think, all bets are off with these two as far as what's going to happen. So right now I'm taking Gibson as being the cheaper option. Stevenson, I think there might be a point in the offseason where his price drops, and that's where I'm going to look to pick up those kind of shares. But I think Gibson is probably, for now, the better value until we have a little bit more information.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Stevenson is fine, but I feel much more comfortable investing a 12th round pick into that Patriot situation than I would a 6th round pick too. And just to give you an idea of the other running backs, if you're dead set on taking a running back at the end of the 6th round, and you don't want to take Rhamondre Stevenson, Swift is there from Chicago, Zamir White, who we just found out, breaking news, the Chicago Bears are going to be on Hard Knocks coming up in August for the preseason edition. It's going to Giants offseason, Bears preseason, in season. We don't know yet, but that's going to be an interesting situation. And then right around Stevenson, Najee Harris, David Montgomery, and James Conner are also going there as well. I think that I want to talk a little bit about a situation where not only could affect the balance of power in tonight's draft if you get it right, but it could affect the balance of power for $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship, $1 million grand prize in the FFPC main event, and that is the Miami Dolphins running back situation. Now, if this was a track meet, Dan, the Dolphins would be able to lap the field, all 31 other teams. There's no question about that with how speedy this backfield is. However, this is football. This is not track and field. And when you look at the 3 Dolphins running backs that people are drafting this year, they're all going at different parts of the draft. The first one, obviously, is Devon Achane. Achane is being selected first, running back 10. He is going off the board on average at the 304 in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Mostert goes 5 rounds after that. He's going in the early 8th as running back 27. And then Jaylen Wright, you can get 3 rounds after Mostert. So 8 full rounds, basically, after Achane. Jaylen Wright is running back 45 in the 11th round. Is there one of those guys at those values that stands out to you more than the other two?
Yeah, right now it's definitely going to be the rookie because, we've got Achane who's, about 185, 190 pounds. And he had trouble staying healthy last year. Now, in college, that wasn't so much of a big issue for him. So, I do have hopes that Achane can stay pretty healthy. Then you got Raheem Mostert, who's like 32 years old, and that's pretty tough to expect, Mostert to keep going and going and going. I mean, by the time you hit his age, what I say is 42, 52. I don't know.
I think 52.
52, yeah. So betting on Jaylen Wright to, he can gain if either one of these guys goes down. And he is by far the cheapest. He's also the biggest, hopefully the most durable. And he's also very, very fast. So I like where he's sitting because no matter what happens, if Mostert, something happens to him, Achane, something happens to him, boom, Jaylen Wright's right in there.
I just love the idea. Like, how much Mike McDaniel values speed. You know that Achane missed games last year because of injury. You mentioned with Mostert, this is a guy who's old and has had issues staying healthy, and he had a career year last year. Beware the career year. We always hear it all the time. Cecil Lamia, football guy, says it all the time, and it's true. And I think high stakes drafters have become sharper over the years. The fact that a guy who scored 20 plus touchdowns last year is going in the 8th round this year, and it's smart. I mean, that is what you should be doing. You shouldn't be overdrafting these guys. But when you talk about Jaylen Wright, going in the 11th round, he's a guy you can keep on your team all year. He's not a roster clogger because you can deploy him if the situation presents itself, and boom, he could win some weeks for you, 1 or 2 weeks. Now, I wouldn't say by himself, but a huge contributor for sure. Let's keep talking about the Dolphins here, Dan. Big news today out of Miami. They signed Jaylen Waddle to the 3-year extension. This is a guy that has scored a ton of touchdowns in the course of his career, despite playing next to Tyreek Hill. Again, another speedy guy that Mike McDaniel finds ways for Tua Tagovailoa to get him the ball. Right now, if we look at the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship ADP, he's not going until wide receiver 18 at the end of the 3rd round. Does that sound like a target for you or a fade for you this season?
For me, it's a fade. And I know that's not the conventional wisdom, but the way I look at it is wide receiver 18 is pretty close to his ceiling unless something happens to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has gotten over 30% target share the past 2 years. I don't see that changing. Nice contract for Waddle, but they're really looking with an eye to the future. because they can use him obviously as a complement to Tyreek, taking pressure off him. They can, he's very valuable on his own. And if anything happens to Tyreek, boom, you've got your guy, and he's light and fast as well. So, I don't hate him, but I don't really love him at this ADP.
Right.
So I would like to see him a little bit later. Like if he was going late fourth, I'd probably be in.
And that's the thing. I think he's not in a spot where you're totally ignoring him there, but it's not really a guy that you're seeking out.
Right.
On the Tyreek Hill tip, March 1st of this year, he turned 30 years old. Any concern about his age at all this year?
Not so far. I mean, we haven't really seen him lose a step yet. So, I'm still cautiously drafting him. Basically he's going at number 4 overall in the Fantasy Pros. And that is a hefty price tag, but we've seen how that can pay off. So, you're taking a chance there, but it's a chance worth taking. So I'm still in.
And he is going high, but I mean, I'm a volume drafter. Well, I'm not a volume drafter like you, but I am at my own level. I'm a volume drafter, and I will have some shares of Tyreek Hill this year for sure, even given where he's going, because I just know how electric he can be. I know how that offense works, and I'm loving what I'm seeing. Still, for now, we'll see what happens in 2024, and I may reevaluate for 2025. Speaking of 2025, that could be the year that Rashee Rice is finally suspended. We just don't know at this point. He could be suspended this year, might not be suspended at all. Could be suspended in 2025, and it could be a long suspension, short suspension. We don't know. If we look at the mojo on him, Rashee Rice, this was a guy that back in February, Dan, you could get him at the end of the 3rd round, early 4th round. Then the legal issues started piling up. I've seen him go as late as the late 11th round in some Fantasy Pros Championship drafts. He's kind of settled out. I'm just looking at the ADP right now. He's kind of settled out over the last 5 days as as an early 8th round pick, wide receiver 41. He's actually fallen behind both Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy right now. Does that represent a value for you, given where people were taking him a couple of months ago and knowing that the suspension may not happen until 2025? How are you handling Rashee Rice in drafts at the moment?
Yeah, this is a tricky one because, in essence, it doesn't really matter what was happening a couple months ago because we weren't really doing the Fantasy Pros back then. Mm-hmm. So, it's not something I'm super concerned about. What I'm looking at is, when he was in the 11th round, I would actually probably take some shares at that point. In the 8th round, I'm still pretty dubious because I think that, more bad news is probably going to come down. There's going to be opportunities to catch him, in the 10th, 11th, whatever, and catch some later shares because there's still a lot of uncertainty about what's going on. I think personally that there's a possibility that they might put him on the commissioner's exempt list because this is a situation that just has really bad optics to it. And the NFL typically has stepped in those kind of situations, with Ray Rice, with Adrian Peterson, and, could it happen with Rashee Rice too? So, and, part of my concern with Rice also is you can't really expect him to go right back into what he was doing before, because what he was doing at the end of 2023 was basically there was a breakdown of the entire Chiefs wide receiver room, and he was the only functional piece. And you had, him and Kelsey and the running backs, and that was it. So, there just wasn't a whole lot more to it. So, now this year you're going to have Hollywood Brown, you're going to have Xavier Worthy, you're going to have, still Kelsey and the running backs and everything else. I just don't see how he's going to return value like he did at the end of last season. So if that's what you're thinking about when you're drafting Rashee Rice, I think you're doing it the wrong way.
You look at it too, where he's going in drafts. If you don't want to take Rashee Rice, you can get, these are all players on average going after him: Christian Watson, DeAndre Hopkins, Jordan Addison, Rome Odunze, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I think you could tell yourself a pretty good story about any of those players being better than Rice this season. He may even fall further, especially as you said, Dan, if more news comes out. Probably not going to be good news, could be bad news, and he might still be a guy you want to stay away from. Even as low as he is right now, given where he was going before, you probably still want to stay away. Harry Snowman is in the YouTube chat right now. He has a question for you, Dan. How do you feel about Cody Parkinson moving to the Rams? Thanks for the hard work. That is Eric on YouTube. So we really appreciate that question coming in. Now, I think The Colby Parkinson thing is interesting because Tyler Higbee tore his ACL this year. Technically, it was in January,
right?
And he might miss most of the season, if not all. Like, we'll see. And it's not like the Rams went out and drafted Jatavian Sanders, who we're going to talk about in a second, or Brock Bowers, or sign a big name tight end. Like, they don't have a ton there right now. Colby Parkinson, if you look at his ADP right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship, I mean, it's almost non-existent. Tight end 40 in the 20th round. He's basically free. How do you feel about Parkinson, Dan?
I mean, he's interesting. Somebody in that, on that team, one of the tight ends is going to do something, I think. But right now, we don't really know who it is. They've got, I'm blanking on his name, the guy who was there last year, Allen, last name.
I'm looking it up right now, but I remember who you're talking about. It is Davis Allen. Davis Allen.
So Davis Allen has already been in this offense. Colby Parkinson coming in new. It's hard to know what to think of Parkinson because he was stuck in that three-way tight end nightmare in Seattle. So, it's hard to tell really what he's capable of. So this is a situation where, the price is very cheap. So at the end of drafts, you can take some Davis Allen, you can take some Cody Parkinson. There's a few other guys on other teams, and you could just rotate around between these guys because probably one of them will have some value. We're not sure who yet, so you might as well just spread it out a little bit.
Is that typically how you handle your tight ends at the back end of draft, Dan? You're just going to splash around with several names, and if one of them hits, then that team's looking really good, but you don't focus in on one or two guys?
Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I'm always looking at guys where I feel like the path to touches is there for them. I'm not just kind of blindly selecting, of course. Like Noah Fant for quite some time was going pretty late. Now he's starting to creep up draft boards, and you're starting to have to pick him in the, like 13th, 14th, 15th round.
Right.
And, so he's definitely moved up. He was my guy that I was it was like an auto click for me in the 18th, 19th, 20th round before. Can't do that anymore. So yeah, I'm starting to focus on, guys like the Rams tight ends, the Chargers tight ends, I think are also interesting. So you've got Hayden Hurst and Will Dissly. I think Disley's going to be the blocker, but they're going to use that blocking tight end a lot, which means he's probably going to leak out for some passes from time to time. And then Hurst is probably going to be the main pass catcher. So it'll be interesting to see. I think probably whichever one of them gets a better goal line role is probably the one you're going to end up wanting.
And the Rams offense was great last year, right? We talk about Nakua and even Kupp when he was healthy, obviously Kyron Williams. That offense was phenomenal. If you're going to take the opposite of that offense, and maybe to another degree, the opposite of that offense on steroids, it was Carolina. It was not good. It was really bad last year. And I think that Dan Morgan, who's the new GM there, realized that, look, I have this number one overall pick in Bryce Young. I've got to get him some help and not put him in a situation where you have the corpse of Adam Thielen, something named Jonathan Mingo on this team. Like, it's got to be more. So what did he do? Went out and drafted Jonathan Brooks as the first running back off the board. Now, I don't know if that pays off in 2024. It might not. But once he's fully recovered from that ACL, you got an electric running back. He went out and traded for Deontay Johnson. Johnson's on that team right now. He went and invested a first-round pick in Xavier Legette. And like him or not, we know the Panthers are going to give him every opportunity to do so. He also drafted Jatavian Sanders, a tight end out of Texas. Jatavian Sanders is tight end 30 right now at the 1808 on average. Again, a tight end that's super cheap. What kind of a rookie season do you think he has in Carolina? Bearing in mind, there's more talent there than there was last year, Dan, but there's also more of an opportunity that this offense could be a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. I think his main problem, though, is just the fact that they did add a lot to the receiver room. They've got a couple of good pass catching running backs with Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks. So, there's a lot of competition for those targets. The way I look at it is if he can beat Cade Otton this year, which Canales did come from Tampa Bay, so there's some hope that that's probably how the tight ends are going to get used. And Cade Otton runs a lot of routes, but he hasn't, he's not doing a lot with it. But he can put in the occasional good game. So, to me, Sanders is a perfect best ball player. I would not want to be stuck putting him in my starting lineup in a managed league. But, if it gets really desperate, which sometimes it does at tight end, I might have to do that. But he's definitely one of the guys I'm rotating around in those later rounds.
Now, you say that you're looking at Sanders late. But what about a tight end that's going early? And I think that, and this is an interesting point, because I read your article on Player Profiler, which people can check out, playerprofiler.com, on some of the fades that you're looking at, or at least players that you need to be wary of before you draft them this year. Dalton Kincaid popped up on that list. And to me, I think about it at face value. Okay, no Stephon Diggs. You're replacing him with a rookie and Curtis Samuel. You still got Khalil Shakir. None of these guys are this big, exciting pass catcher. This should be wheels up for Kincaid. But I think, as you did, you look a little bit deeper. Not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso would say, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because, basically they lost a lot of the targets they lost were from the outside, receivers. So that's going to be what they're looking to replace mostly. So I'm not sure that there's a path for Kincaid to get a ton more targets, and especially if Dawson Knox is healthy. And I understand they're going to use Kincaid in the slot a lot, but they're also going to want to use Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, guys like that in the slot as well. And they are good football players as well. So, my concern with Kincaid is not that he can't pay off his ADP. I think he definitely can, but you're drafting him right at his ceiling. I would rather have Evan Ingram a couple rounds later, Kyle Pitts a couple rounds later. These are guys, that you can get for less draft capital and still have the exact same payoff that Kincaid would have. So that's the way I've been playing.
Do you think the ADP is right? And GDLT is in the chat right now. He wants to know Cooper Kupp or Ladd McConkey. Cooper Kupp is a mid-4th round pick. Ladd McConkey is not going until the end of the 7th. You're in on, if you could only have one, you're still taking Kupp over McConkey, right?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, that's a very weird dichotomy to put out there.
Right, exactly.
Because
you
in the draft,
you could have both easily if you wanted them.
Yeah, I definitely do not see it as either or. So both if you want, but I'm not really shying away too much from either one. I think both of them are worth being around even weight on.
You cautioned us on Dalton Kincaid. Do we also need to exercise caution on one CJ Stroud this year, Dan?
I'm definitely exercising some caution. I mean, not that Stroud is a bad player or anything like that. Stroud is excellent. If you're doing a Texan stack, which, there is definitely worth doing from time to time, yeah, you definitely want Stroud. But other than that, I mean, you're really looking at a guy who's primarily a passer. He's not a runner, and you take a guy like Dak Prescott is kind of my comp for him. And even last year, Dak threw for 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns, and he had a similar rushing output to Stroud. Prescott only averaged 23.2 points per game, and Stroud got 21.5 points per game. So this is what I'm kind of looking at as the ceiling. He can still only get up to 23.2, and where you've got to take him in the draft, you're going up against these dual threat quarterbacks who are putting in a lot of rushing yards and also rushing scores potentially as well. So, I think you can take Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, even Kirk Cousins, to name a few, and they will score pretty similarly to Stroud, and they will be multiple rounds cheaper. So unless you're doing that Texan stack, grab one of the cheaper options. You don't have to pay for the designer label.
Former co-host of this show and current host of Stack Hunters, Bradley Stalder, will be drafting with you tonight. Are you a co-host of that show too, Dan, or do you just pop on every so often?
I am a very regular feature on that show.
I was confused. I didn't know.
I am the default. I'm his default partner, except when I am out of town, which seems to happen a little bit more frequently these days. So, but I'm there probably about 3 out of every 4 weeks, something like that. So,
all right. So.
Yeah.
So Stack Hunters, by the way, check that out on YouTube and the Player Profiler YouTube channel. Check out everything Dan's doing over at playerprofiler.com at Overhyped Sleeper. Last question out the door on this. You guys are picking second tonight. Abib Agbutoba is going to be drafting ahead of you. Do you expect him to throw a curveball here? Who are the top 2 players for you tonight that you're getting one of them?
I am totally ready for him to throw a curveball, and I'm gonna definitely recommend that Bradley and I draft one of the top 12 players.
Okay. Listen, hard-hitting analysis, people. You're not going to get that anywhere else.
I can't give it away. I mean, because I don't want to give anybody, an edge on strategy of being able to say, well, they're taking one of these two guys, and so don't want to say too much beforehand. But yeah, we have an idea, we have a game plan put together, and this is one of those drafts where you're not going to get really value falling. If you have sleepers, you better grab them, because the odds are that one of these other 11 guys also has that same guy as a sleeper, and players are going to get pushed up pretty aggressively. Of course, that means somebody else is falling, but if you don't like the guy who's falling, that's not going to help you out too much. So it's going to really come down to team construction. How well can you put together a team that's cohesive, that makes sense, and that's capable of doing what you need to do.
Yeah, this is the equivalent of 12 sharks chomping at one little tiny chum bucket and trying to make a 7-course meal out of a couple of ketchup packets, which is going to be great to watch. It's going to be great. And you say it's strategy. I think you are an absolute content creator pro. You're not going to tell me, because you want everybody to stay tuned for the 8 o'clock hour so everybody could see what you and Bradley do live. Until then, we'll follow you on the X at Overhyped Sleeper. Check out everything at playerprofiler.com. Dan, thank you once again for being a part of the show. We really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely, Balky. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the draft in about an hour and a half here.
It's going to be great. Good luck tonight. Go get them. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere, because in 100 seconds, we're coming back with Establish the Runs. John Daigle, who's been drafting, he's going to be drafting 5 tonight. We're going to get into his strategy and much more. This is the HSFF Show on BSN.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft, and you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here, or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here, and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty, because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there, has told me that. So that's what's up. Get set up.
We are counting down on the minutes until the start of the 2024 FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship hardway draft. We're looking at about 1 hour and 25 minutes till these 12 Sharks go at it and see what happens coming up on tonight's draft, which is going to be fantastic. You can watch it right here on the Better Sports Network starting at 8 o'clock. But until then, let's get to some more pregame, shall we? I want to welcome in a guy you have seen co-host this show before, a guy who is an Emmy Award winner, a guy who is an FSWA Award winner, and a guy who is now with Established Run. You follow him on the X at @NotJDaigle. It is indeed John Daigle hanging out with us tonight. John, welcome back in, man.
Good to see you, Eric. We usually don't get to talk to each other until August, so it's always fun to join you in May instead.
This is a lot of fun. And now when did you become a part of Establish the Run? This is pretty new, isn't it?
Well, it felt like it was a long time, but officially I think it's now been 3 months,
right?
Since last company done in January, and then we waited until after the season to move forward. But yes, officially with Established the Run, our best ball product is out now, which I have my hands all over that with the tiers, helping out with the rankings and everything else, other niche articles people are looking for, like late round stacks and everything, including all the FFPC work. So yeah, it's now been a few healthy months, but you and we're supposed to be in the middle of the off season, but instead here we are gearing up for literally one of the most important drafts to happen within this 2-3 month calendar.
Yeah, this is fun because I think that once you guys come out of this draft tonight and you start drafting against, other people who maybe aren't as informed, maybe not as experienced, it's going to feel, what's the line from Damon, not from Matt Damon, from Grandma and Rounders, where he says, this is going to feel like a Swedish massage. It's going to feel like a Swedish massage when you get out of this draft, because you won't have to deal with all this nonsense anymore of all these sharks coming at you. So let's kick things off right away. And I'm going to give you a multiple choice question. And the question is rookie quarterbacks this year. Which one would you rather have? Would you rather have Jayden Daniels? Would you rather have Caleb Williams? Or maybe in a format like this, would you rather have both of them, John?
For me, it's still Jayden Daniels, and I'm slightly confused about his ADP just because we did this recently last year with Anthony Richardson. For rushing quarterbacks always, we should just lean on the fact that their floor is delivered by their rushing. That's what makes Richardson only 4 starts, but still led every quarterback in rushing points per game last year. And Jayden Daniels, who throughout his career at LSU averaged 9.7 rushing points per game. That's how he gets his floor. The thing is, whereas everyone, if you had your doubts about Richardson last year, it was because he was truly and still is a raw project as a passer. That's not Jayden Daniels. Like, Daniels has a much cleaner resume through the air from day one. Literally led the nation last year with 11.5 yards per attempt from a clean pocket when not pressured. Not only that, but for as much worry as we have about Cliff Kingsbury as a play caller, he carried Kyler Murray to a QB 12 finish in points per game, a QB 1 as a rookie. And as I wrote in our tiers at Establish the Run, he led the league as a coach in the Cardinals against light boxes. His offenses faced light boxes at the highest rate in the league, 40% for those 4 seasons, because he runs this spread scheme and attacks horizontally, as Sharp Football's Rich Rebar honed it, the horizontal raid rather than the vertical raid. But that's good for rushing quarterbacks. And also, like, one caveat to that should help out our fantasy situation is to remember that Dan Quinn is a lot like Norv Turner, Freddie Kitchens, Adam Gase, all these coaches who are very good at one thing, but historically when they took on too much as a head coach, they failed at their job entirely. And in 5 years in Atlanta, Dan Quinn's defenses never ranked top 16 in EPA per play. He was a terrible defensive play caller while as a head coach because he took on too much. So I really think we have the perfect cocktail for Jayden Daniels to get there as the QB 8 through 10 if all goes well. So I'm still very, very high on him.
Yeah, Daniels is going basically a full round ahead of Caleb Williams right now. 10.07 is quarterback 11. Caleb Williams, quarterback 13 at the 11.09. Brock Purdy basically splitting the difference between those two rookie quarterbacks. Speaking of rookie quarterbacks, there is one in Minnesota too, John. His name is J.J. McCarthy. We don't know exactly when he's going to take over as the starter there. And given the situation there where Sam Darnold seems like more like a placeholder until McCarthy is ready, obviously based on what the Vikings did in the draft, Are you drafting a bunch of Aaron Jones this year, knowing that they're going to lean on the running back situation more? I know he's old, and I know he's had a history of injuries, but what about Aaron Jones in Minnesota with this quarterback situation?
Definitely don't hate Aaron Jones, especially in this type of format, PPR league. We know Aaron Jones has only been healthy for a full year one time in his entire career. But during, in redraft leagues, we all forget we also need usable scores every single week. We're playing football, which is done in pockets of 2 to 4 weeks, not 17 games. If you have a 17 game usable score, that means you're pretty much drafting Christian McCaffrey. So we're just playing differently. I don't hate Aaron Jones necessarily, but also it's just an ambiguous situation throughout that most of the time I end up avoiding Aaron Jones. While I may not push back against him, I really just don't have much. Yes, he had those amazing games, including the playoffs you talked about, but even the Packers didn't recognize it. The Packers, after that stretch, just allowed him to walk in favor of Josh Jacobs. So to me, I get my Viking exposure through Ty Chandler. Usually, in this type of format with the sharp guys who understand Ty Chandler's elite receiving back, a 95th percentile athlete who earned touches last year whenever Alexander Madison was out. And then they had no choice but to split time with Madison because Chandler was so good when he started, where he's probably going to go a little earlier than most home leagues expect here. But that's how I get my exposure, just understanding that it's going to be an ambiguous target tree this year from Sam Darnold, a little more down on Justin Jefferson compared to consensus 2. Not too much, still a wide receiver 6, but in my opinion, he doesn't have wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes this year based on the target tree from Darnold. Remember, in those 4 games, even without T.J. Hawkinson to close the year, Justin Jefferson averaged 4 fewer PPR points per game. He was actually a worse player, despite Nick Mullins passing for 400 yards in multiple contests. So I think Jefferson's the one really I'm down on compared to consensus. Won't be drafting him inside the top 5 this tonight.
And this is interesting because you have that top 5 pick, that 5th overall pick. So we'll be very, and I'll ask you a little bit about that in a second. Joe Mixon, you mentioned it. Aaron Jones in Minnesota, a lot of running backs changing addresses this year, but Joe Mixon was one of those guys. He gets traded from Cincinnati to Houston, signs the big extension, and he's going right now as running back 15. Now he's going at the 501. This is basically the same neighborhood as Alvin Kamara, James Cook, and I guess Kenneth Walker kind of creeps in there a little bit as well. What kind of a season do you think he's going to have in Houston? And is Joe Mixon worth that 4 or 5 turn pick this year?
I believe it's going to be pretty much what happened in Cincinnati, given the contract, where it's an every touch opportunity role for Joe Mixon, and he just has to be more efficient. The good thing is you could argue he's going to be in an elite offense, and maybe even the best offense he's been in some time since the Joe Burrow Bengals Super Bowl run. And that's what's funny about where he falls, because you mentioned Kenneth Walker and Alvin Kamara, but really, like, what should be happening right now is the same arguments I just made for Joe Mixon. Contract, workhorse role, elite offense. That's the argument everyone's making for Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, whereas you can wait a round or 2 and get Joe Mixon instead. And so right now, like, that's kind of the opportunity I latch onto. If I am looking at an anchor RB approach in that range, I don't mind doing it with Joe Mixon instead of Josh Jacobs around earlier. But right now, it genuinely, like tonight, for instance, it just depends on how rounds 2 and 3 fall to me.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but getting into Josh Jacobs here, he's obviously moves from Las Vegas to Green Bay. He's a Packer this year. You don't necessarily think he's going to be a bust this year, but you think the value of Mixon is so much better that you would not want to utilize a mid-3rd round pick on Jacobs this year.
I think there's a chance Jacobs is a bust and Mixon is the same player going around later. So that's why I would say you just wait for Mixon. A lot like last year, and all the Sharks and FFPC had it figured out. We all showed up week 1 for the live draft and whatnot, and Josh Jacobs was falling to the 3rd, 4th round turn, middle of the 4th round. They had it right despite him not hitting there. But honestly, now everyone looks at Jacobs and says 2 years ago, we are now a year removed from that career season when he finishes the RB4 in points per game, and this is the bounce back. But I don't think that's the case really, because if you look at the extent of his career, 5 seasons in the league, that 1 year, 2 years ago, that was his only time finishing as a top 12 running back in points per game. I would consider it an anomaly. Not only that, but everyone remembers if they had him, that torrential tear stopped in week 14. If you made the playoffs with Jacobs, your number 1 seed just fell completely, because now going back to that time, over his last 18 games, he's literally been one of the worst running backs in the league. All metrics comparable to Ezekiel Elliott. And so just given, I think he's closer to going down the path of DeMarco Murray and Le'Veon Bell, where those touches just got to his bones and now he's done forever, as opposed to being the guy that bounces back a year later. So I'm pretty much going to be heavy, at least right now, in avoiding Josh Jacobs in every single kind of format at this current range.
I want to bring up what Permar99's posted in the YouTube chat.
The great Permar, yes.
The great Permar, absolutely. He posted that there's a big 4 at running back this year. McCaffrey, Hall, not McCaffrey. Hall, Robinson, Gibbs, and Jonathan Taylor. He thinks those are the flawless 4 running backs this year. He thinks you need one this year. It's a must. I never say it's a must when it comes down to just, a pool of 4, because I don't want to feel like if I don't get one of those 4 guys, I'm drafting dead. But he does point out the emphasis on getting one of those 4. How much do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree. I genuinely don't think we've ever seen so many blemishes in the next tier of running backs. Like, I even like Devon Achane and Kyron Williams, Achane especially, quite a bit. But I understand the blemishes in their game between workloads. And Kyron Williams, although he was really good on his volume, if the volume does go away due to Blake Corum, even a little bit, and he's no longer a 20 touch per game back, then of course we have to dink him a hair, maybe even a whole round. So I understand all of those notions. Thus, if someone would want to start a Bijan or Breece Hall in that next range of wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, if someone wants to go Bijan or Breece Hall between them, I'm totally fine with it, because I understand what's next. Even Jahmyr Gibbs, who I am much more open to drafting on FFPC in particular in the first, second round turn, because of the PPR format, the 2 flex outs. And then usually, as we all know, like, we're not trying to get wide receivers in rounds 15 through 18. We're trying to tack onto our tight end flex, because tight ends give us so many outs in those last rounds, and just kind of tight end premium scoring. But for Jahmyr Gibbs, remember, in the last 12 games, he and David Montgomery played together post-bye, including the playoffs. David Montgomery actually out-touched Jahmyr Gibbs by 10 total touches. Montgomery's not going away, because he's not as explosive as Gibbs, but he's also still very good at professional football. So that still leaves me with like some pause if you're drafting Gibbs in the first round. Again, if you want an anchor RB and you have him at the turn, you're tacking them on with a wide receiver or tight end, totally fine with it. But even when you start at the turn, I have pause with the next 12 running backs.
I want to. You mentioned Kyron Williams, and I do want to ask you about him because I know there's people that I wouldn't say freaking out, but they definitely were concerned after the Rams utilized that day 2 pick on Blake Corum. And if you look at the ADP in the FFPC, the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, Kyron Williams, running back 7 at the 209. The next running back being drafted by the Rams, or by fantasy players from the Rams, Blake Corum, running back 37 at the 1001. What's the best way to attack that situation in a format like the hard way draft tonight?
And it's usually, the golden rule of what we do in fantasy football is that if you're boasting a guy up just for the touches, it's probably not something we should be doing.
Right.
Again, Kyron Williams was really good on those touches, but the addition of Blake Corum is certainly concerning. I will say they at least contributed to their offense, like perhaps even wanting to go run heavier. Cooper Kupp, for a question earlier from the chat, Cooper Kupp is still the light years better pick than Ladd McConkey. Remember, Cooper Kupp was still the wide receiver 24 in points per game in PPR last year. Like, if Cooper Kupp does the same thing, you're going to want Cooper Kupp over Ladd McConkey. It's okay that Cooper Kupp is not a top 5 receiver anymore, but still going in this range where he pays off his ADP. Completely okay. But they devoted so much capital to their offensive line and rebuilding that structure that I do wonder if this new blueprint under Sean McVay, still a lot of 3 wide sets, but running more from it too. So although I still like Kyron Williams, again, I understand anyone who would say he's going to lose touches. I completely get it, which is why I still think if I'm doing an anchor hero RB approach, round 3, completely fine. A lot of times Kyron Williams, though, may not make it to the end of round 3.
He won't. I mean, like, and that's the thing as we move forward in drafting season 2. Rams, fascinating team to watch. I mean, we talked a little bit about Nacua. You just mentioned Kupp. We just talked about Williams and Corum. But what about Demarcus Robinson? How many shares do you think you're going to have of him this year in your best ball draft? Well, just entirely your managed leagues, your best ball leagues as well.
Out of who?
Demarcus Robinson.
Oh, yeah, Demarcus Robinson, a favorite at ETR in particular, maybe just because of me. And I refuse to let them take him out of any articles. But we saw he was hanging around there with an 18% target share in those last 8 games he played alongside Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And it's because they really used him like Sean McVay used Odell Beckham whenever Robert Woods got injured during their Super Bowl run. Like, they specifically put Beckham on the field and gave him targets inside the 10-yard line as like a touch, almost like a PPR tight end, like a touchdown monster. And that's what happened. Robinson actually led the team, Nacua included, in end zone targets over those last 8 games. So I love Robinson as like a late round pick that a lot of people are sleeping on. He avoided the wide receiver capital that we were concerned about in the first round. So yes, I do enjoy Robinson as a later round selection.
Yeah, and I think he's a fine guy to have a lot of shares
Yeah.
of this year for sure. Absolutely, especially given how cheap he is in drafts right now. A player that another wide receiver that I think in my talks with a lot of high stakes players and maybe dynasty players that feel they got burned by Jameson Williams, feel like that they're not targeting him, they're letting him go. They've been nonplussed by basically what they've seen the last couple of years from him. Are you among those players, those drafters, I should say, John, that have punted on Jameson Williams? Wide receiver 48 at the 908 is where he's going right now, which still single-digit rounds, but I think a lot of people envision him being a much higher pick at this point. He's the beneficiary of playing on a Detroit offense that features a couple of target hogs in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, but sometimes that can allow him to make some big plays, which he did do last season. How do you feel about Jameson Williams at his current ADP at the end of the 9th round right now?
We still just don't know who he is. Like double-digit rookies, I believe it was 11 rookies ran more routes than him just last year, as opposed to Jameson Williams for his entire career, just because he's been battling with injuries and other items these first 2 years. I will say the Lions have a great run out if you are a schedule bro, because they only play 3 games outdoors all year. Yes, 2 games outdoors comes in the fantasy playoffs in week 16 and 17. That's certainly concerning. Otherwise, though, Jared Goff in the passing game seems like they can carry you through the regular season. My only issue with Jameson Williams, as we continue to say, like, if we're drafting this player early, why can't we just arbitrage him later? My only issue with JMO is that, like, Rashee Shaheed is who everyone wants Jameson Williams to be. Rashee Shaheed has been good on a limited basis and now presumably walks into 2 wide receiver sets without Michael Thomas. And so in like later on or around the same range, like I actually prefer Rashee Shaheed to JMO. So it's not really a situation of me being down on JMO. It's more about, I think I can find his production elsewhere later on.
John, have we as we're talking receivers here a lot with you, we touched on Caleb Williams earlier. What about Keenan Allen going from the Chargers to the Bears as a guy who has a lot of shares with Keenan Allen, hoping to squeeze out one really good last year with Justin Herbert? Didn't happen. Now he's going to go to Chicago and fend for targets, not only with Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, but DeAndre Swift, Cole Kmet as well. Is now the time, is 2024 the year to let somebody else take Keenan Allen and let him slip in drafts? And to give you an idea, and you already know this, wide receiver 32 at the 604 in FantasyPros Championship drafts. John, how do you feel about Keenan Allen this year?
Well, since we can get Keenan Allen as our wide receiver 3 or 4, I definitely don't hate it. I know a lot of people are down on him, 32-year-old slot wide out, but at least we know he's someone who has historically earned targets, might even open in 2 wide sets over Rome Odunze. I don't expect Allen to come off the field, at least in 3 wide sets too, because Rome Odunze, the last 2 years as a starter with the Huskies, only ran 16.5% of his routes from the slot. Like Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's not really a guy who pushes the other guy off the field. Not only that, but if you look at Warren Sharp's predicted schedules based on last year's metrics, the Bears have the 3rd easiest strength of schedule this year. So it's a really good run out for Caleb Williams and the Bears, honestly. You have DJ Moore, who was 4th in yards per route run against man coverage last year. Keenan Allen was 8th in yards per route run as a 31-year-old against zone coverage. So although I don't think it's going to be as consistent as it was for Keenan Allen from Justin Herbert these past couple of seasons, I do think there are going to be weeks where Keenan Allen becomes a top 12 wide receiver, and we can just pick those shootout games. So I want Keenan Allen at least on my bench for sure.
Final question for you out the door, John. You are sitting at 5 tonight. I know a lot of what you're going to do at that pick depends upon what you're going to see with the first 4 picks. Anything goes in this draft. Anything can and will happen. Obviously, what are your thoughts drafting from the 5 spot tonight? How are you going to attack it?
The leftover spot. And I don't think I'm even mad about it, because in previous years, it was Travis Kelce, right? This was like the auto lock of, we know Travis Kelce's going to go in the top 4 picks. Maybe that's even if someone was in my spot would pick Sam Laporta at 105. I don't know. But to me, it's just literally the leftover. It doesn't hurt anyone, so I think I can say that I'm probably going the leftover wide receiver, thinking I'm getting St. Brown, but perhaps I'm not. But right now I am in a toss-up of St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and if they want to let Christian McCaffrey fall, they're not going to. But if they want to, I'll be happy to take him at 105. So I think those are my 3 picks right now.
We're always happy to read everything John Daigle is producing over at Establish the Run, establishthерun.com, at Establish the Run, on the X. Follow him on the X at NotJDaigle. John, good luck tonight. Go get them. Thank you so much for joining the show again.
Good seeing you, Eric, and good luck to Fantasy Mojo and everyone else, but not in the draft, just on the rest of the show.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. That is John Daigle, ladies and gentlemen, from EstablishTheRun.com. Great stuff from him as he is drafting 5th tonight. So we talked with the team drafting 2nd. That's Bradley Stalder and Dan Williamson, who made us a part of his evening tonight. John Daigle is drafting 5th tonight. And then we are going to talk with, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk with the guy who is drafting 10th overall. We've been referencing his ADP all night. It's only fair that we have him on the show. Darren Armani, the godfather of the Pros vs. Joes Challenge, and he's drafting 10th tonight. Fantasy Mojo is coming up next. You're watching the pregame coverage of the 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship Hardway Draft on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. Hour number 2 is coming up next.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft and, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Pearsall and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there. Has told me that. So.
If you are looking for a new challenge with your Dynasty Leagues, check out FFPC Empire Dynasty Leagues. Dynasty Leagues with a large progressive prize pool that grows yearly and is only awarded once there is a back-to-back winner. When that happens, the back-to-back champion wins the Emprise prize pool, and they win the first place prize pool for that year. The league disbands, everybody gets their deposits back, and you're free to enter another Empire Dynasty League. So check that out at myffpc.com. You are watching live pregame coverage of the 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship Hardway Draft featuring some of the top players, top high-stakes players and pundits out there that try to win $1 million by drafting against 11 other teams this year. It's never going to happen, but it's fun. It's fun to look at that these guys just beat each other up for 20 rounds. And we're going to be doing that at the top of the hour tonight, live coverage right here on the Better Sports Network, featuring Aiden LaCorey and Dave Tripoli from the FFPC. They will bring you all the picks live tonight right here on these airwaves, and you can check that out right now. If you want to join the 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship and compete against these guys, feel free to do so at myffpc.com. These guys are all going for $1 million grand prize. You can go for that grand prize too. It's a $6 million prize pool. Sign up by going either to myffpc.com, myffpc.com, or scanning that QR code that is right in front of your face on the screen tonight, and join these guys, and maybe you could be the $1 million winner in the Fantasy Pros Championship this season. Let's welcome in our next guest tonight. He is drafting 10th in the Hardway Draft. He is the Pros vs. Joes draft creator / godfather, the #1 source of FFPC data, 13 years and running. He won this league 2 years ago. He's been playing in the Scott Fish Bowl for nearly a dozen years, and he is the Kings Classic Redraft champ from 2018. Follow him on the X at Fantasy Mojo and subscribe to his website at fantasymojo.com. It is the incomparable Darren Armani. Darren, welcome back to these airwaves. How pumped are you for this draft tonight, man?
I'm ready to go through the meat grinder, man. This is main event intensity in May. This is crazy. This is every year we do this.
You know,
we beat the crap out of each other.
Yeah, and you're going to, and that's the thing is like you talk about main event. And I think this is way, way tougher than most FFPC main. Like as much as, the main event, you're ponying up the better part of $2,000 to play in, but to go for $1 million grand prize. But like these, I mean, you're talking about going up against the Go Bills franchise. And Sean Stutzman, I forgot to mention you at the top of the show. Sean Stutzman, the other guy who's part of the Go Bills trio. You're going up against Abib Bagbatoba, who was back-to-back winner in the Fantasy Pros Championship. I mean, this is insane. Like, how much do you have to adjust your draft strategy going up against these 11 hardos tonight, as opposed to if you're drafting in a normal Fantasy Pros Championship draft or even an FFPC main event?
Yeah, there's no soft spots. And basically, although my bread and butter is the ADP, it kind of goes out the window in this draft because these guys are just going to take, for a lot of them, I think it might be their first Fantasy Pros. So these are the guys, they're just going to, grab the players that they like. They're not even going to be too concerned with ADP. So you just have to be ready and do the same thing. Don't sit around and wait for somebody to fall back to you, because what'll end up happening at the end of the draft is you'll have a bunch of great values on players that you don't really like. So you need to strike early and get players that that you're targeting.
I've noticed that too, like in the course of because I'll facilitate some of these hybrid leagues we have at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas, where we're doing the $5,000 big payback leagues or the $10,000 entry high society leagues, where these are a lot of the same players are in those leagues and they know who they like. And you'll watch a main event draft out there, Darren, and you know this firsthand. You'll watch a main event draft out there, and some of the players that are being taken in the 18th, 19th round, they're gone in like round 10, round 11. And I'm like, I'm every single year I do this, I'm like, who are these guys going to take the last few rounds? Because there's like nobody. And how do you handle something like that? Is it just a scenario where you're taking like, YOLO tight ends or just any warm-bodied running back at that point?
Well, there is a little bit of a philosophy to follow here. Because it's May, you can grab a lot of players and then just see what happens, over the next 4 months, because people are going to get hurt. So I think people will tend to just, throw more darts and go for long shots, knowing that you still have 2 waiver runs before the season starts. So you can churn over, some of those, risks that you took a shot on in the draft tonight. And I can tell you this, it's not just a draft that's a grind. Because these guys are so intense, the waiver wire every week is nuts. I went out and did I tracked the waiver activity in this league. So you have 1,400 Fantasy Pros leagues. You may have a little more this year. This league was number 29 in terms of waiver moves made.
Wow.
Course of the year. So it is just, constant activity. Nobody's throwing in the towel, with 5 or 6 weeks to go. If they're out of it, like it's a matter of pride. If
Well, I mean, nobody wants to finish last, obviously.
No.
I mean, there's something to be said for that. Like, there's no embarrassment in finishing last. Well, yeah, I finished last among 11 of the toughest players out there. Like, there's no embarrassment to it, but nobody wants to do it.
Nah, you don't want to be last.
Let's talk about your Eagles here, and I'm going to kick things off with the tush push effect on Saquon Barkley, the Eagles' brand new running back. For years, Darren, in Philadelphia, we saw mostly and not always. I mean, there was different years where it wasn't the case, but we saw a lot of RBBC in Philly, and it was maddening for players that were drafting Eagles running backs. No, ain't no RBBC in Philly anymore. It is all about Saquon Barkley, but the tush push could affect his touchdowns. We know touchdowns are not a sticky stat, but at the same time, they would affect Barkley being drafted as the running back 5 right now, which is where he's going in the second round. How much is that Jalen Hurts' prowess at the goal line going to affect Barkley's stats this season?
Well, I think they brought him in because they wanted to take the heat off of Hurts. I mean, it, they did that. It was a function of necessity because they didn't really have a back that they could rely on to punch it in at the goal line. Swift, that's not Swift's game, and Kenny Gainwell's a little dude. So Jalen Hurts can squat 500-600 pounds in front of a monster line. So they just kept doing it because nobody could stop them. But what you saw towards the end of the year was teams sort of knew they couldn't stop them. So they started taking cheap shots. They started jumping the snap, trying to disrupt things. And Hurts was put in a compromising position. And I think they want to get away from that. So if people think Saquon Barkley is going to be challenged by tush push, I think they're going to be way more selective when they do that this year. And they don't have Kelsey anymore, anchoring that line. So it may not even be as effective as it was last year.
That's a good point. Like that, and that's the pro Barkley view. And if we look at your website, FantasyMojo.com, if we look at where Barkley is going, I think I mentioned it earlier. He is running back 5 at the 112. That's a price point that you'd be on board with, right?
Yeah, I've taken him in a few leagues. In some of the best ball tournaments, I've taken him between 110, 112. I've been living in that back end of the draft this year so far. So I'm pretty comfortable drafting out of the 10 spot. I'm not comfortable with who's drafting at 11 and 12, but as far as the 10 spot goes, I'm pretty got a lot of drafts under my belt for that.
So and you're talking about the 11 and 12 spot tonight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you got Davis Maddox at 11.
Yep.
And then you get Hubbard and Hilo at 12. So, the value's not going to be falling back to me. Those guys, Hubbard's a cowboy. He's going to take, he knows what he wants and he's just going to grab it. He's one of those guys who's not going to care too much about ADP. So I'm going to be very proactive, I think.
My God, I didn't even, this is how crazy it is. And I don't want to say those guys blended in the background because David Hubbard won the 2016 FFPC main event. But when you get Mark Garcia and David Hubbard teaming up, mother of God. I mean, this is just, it's insane. It's going to be 12 starving sharks at the end of this draft because nobody's going to be happy with their draft. They're all going to be ticked off, but it's going to make great content. It's going to make great for everybody tonight.
This is definitely a must watch. Especially, knowing you've got so many accomplished players, I think people need to pay attention to who's picking who. Usually we go by no names and not disclose, who are the favorites of certain players, but it's kind of, everybody's showing their cards tonight.
They totally are. And I want you to show your cards basically. Some of these other guys that I've had on tonight with Dan Williamson and John Daigle, we talked about individual players, and I know you and I just talked about Barkley. I do want to get into some not philosophical stuff, but trends that you've been seeing with everything you've been putting out over at FantasyMojo.com. The early running back hate. I feel like ever since Zero RB, Sean Siegel, Matt Waldman, I don't, whoever came up with it, whoever he believed came up with it, not important, but we know they came up with it right around the same time. And then Peter Overzet taking to the next level with Pissing Yellow. You have a situation right now this year where I am just seeing a ton of running backs fall. And a lot of wide receivers are getting pushed up. Is the early running back hate that you've been seeing, is this as bad as it's ever been, or is it not as bad as I'm making it out to be?
No, it's still trending anti-RB. So last year we had 9 running backs going in the first 2 rounds. And this year we only have 8. And if you go 3 rounds, you had 14 running backs going in the first 3 rounds last year. This year we only have 11. So the yellow keeps floating up to the top. And it's a function of, the hype, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's everybody's kind of gravitating towards it. And the other thing is tight ends are pushed up this year too. So I think running backs are, being lowered because we've got 5 or 6 tight ends going in the first 3 rounds, which I have not seen that, sort of hysteria over early tight ends either. It's really big.
Tight ends, so we're seeing 3 of them. Yeah, 3 of them in the second round. We're seeing 2 of them go. No, 3 of them go in the third round as well. Evan Engram goes in the early 4th, and then we don't see tight end 8 until the 5-6 turn with Ferguson and Kittle. So you're right. I mean, they are being pushed up. It's weird because They fell a little bit in the first round, but now you have two of them basically going at that 1-2 turn. How much have you seen any like teams starting off Laporta, Kelsey from the 112-201?
Oh, absolutely. I think a couple nights ago in the Fantasy Pros. In fact, a couple nights ago in the Fantasy Pros, somebody started 3 tight end start. And I tend to see the dual tight ends often at the 12 spot, Laporta, Kelsey. And then, if between 1 and 5, a lot of times you'll see like a Kincaid doubling up with a McBride. So people aren't shy of grabbing 2 elite tight ends. Because, once you that elite tier, then it kind of like there's a little bit of soft spot, and then it picks up again. In rounds 8 and above, people start hitting the tight ends again. So if you want elite tight end, there's a lot of competition for them. But like you said, this is all at the expense of running backs, because the bulk of running backs are being, round 7 to 12. That seems to be the sweet spot for grabbing RBs, because so many people are fading the RBs. Now, they're good running backs.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be startable running backs. They're just falling at the expense of, wide receivers and tight ends. And quarterbacks are falling a little bit this year too. You don't see as many going in the early rounds as you have previously.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, you see, I'll bring it up right now as far as the quarterbacks go. The first quarterback is not coming off the board until Josh Allen at the 312 in the Fantasy Pros Championship. And then you have your Hurts, your Mahomes, Jackson, Stroud, Anthony Richardson. Like, okay, look at this. There are only 3 quarterbacks being drafted in the top 5 rounds this year. Then you get into the 6th round, we get Jackson, Stroud, and Richardson. Then you have quarterback 7 and going until almost the 9th round. That's at the end of the 8th round. Prescott, Burrow, Kyler Murray, Jordan Love going in that area right there. I just mentioned Stroud as far as quarterbacks being drafted. Stroud is quarterback 5 at the 605, and it's been sort of a renaissance in Houston. You think back to the Deshaun Watson, DeAndre Hopkins teams there, and now you have Stroud, now you have Diggs, now you have Tank Dell, now you have Nico Collins, who just signed that big long extension with the Texans. Do you have a favorite Texans wide receiver? Again, at cost, Aaron. Collins, wide receiver 15, Diggs 19, Tank Dell 31. Collins and Diggs are kind of, I don't want to say they're right next to each other, but Collins is a mid-3rd round. Diggs is going at the 3-4 turn, and then you can get Tank Dell basically at that 5-6 turn. When you factor in ADP cost to it, do you have a favorite, maybe a guy that you'd be targeting tonight?
Yeah, I mean, Collins is typically the guy I'll take out of those 3. Now, because they're all going so early, somebody's going to underperform at the end of the year. Like, they're not all going to like produce to justify that draft capital. So one of these guys is going to, disappoint. So if it's a matter of, if you're doing multiple drafts, just spread your distribution across those 3 guys. Like I wouldn't load up on all one of, on a particular guy. So I'm mostly flipping between Diggs and Collins, but I seem to have more Collins at this point.
You are going to be at a position tonight where you could ostensibly take the first tight end off the board at the 110. You could also wait and not grab an elite tight end. You could grab 2 tight ends. There are a lot of different ways to attack the tight end position in drafts this year. What's the best way to do it? Again, let's talk about from where you're at tonight at the 110. Are you trying to get one in the top 2, rounds tonight? Are you waiting and going with volume later? What's the best way to handle it? And again, let's do it in this format tonight, because this is good. It's going to be wild, man. It's going to be really wild.
Yeah, you can't in a redraft. This isn't best ball. So in a redraft, you have to have a guy you can start. So you can't play, let me grab 3 values in the late rounds and do that. That's not what you are able to do here. So I would expect the tight ends to go, people aren't going to be shy about grabbing them early. So and the spot I'm at, Kelsey, Laporta. I'll probably be in a position to get one of those if I want one. It depends. Like these guys are such wild cards in what they're going to do. I can't really. This isn't a draft I can script out.
Right.
I have to have some pivots in mind. But historically, like last year, I had a ton of Kelsey, and I did the Mahomes Kelsey stack, and it didn't really hurt me. It didn't the win rate on that wasn't like it was the year before. It was ridiculous. It was like 65% of the teams that did the Kelsey Mahomes stack, advanced to the championship round. That's how awesome it was. Last year, it was basically average because you paid so much for that stack, and everybody was doing it. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't want to tip my hand too much, but we'll see what comes flying around that 1-2 turn and see what I have to do there.
I am on the stack finder right now at fantasymojo.com, and I'm trying to find out, and I probably won't be able to get it done. And I should have done this before the show, but I didn't. I'm trying to find out the Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce stack, which was super popular the last several years, to the point where I think some people thought they couldn't win anything, especially the $1 million grand prize, unless they had the Mahomes Kelce stack. I thought I saw you post on X that, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews is gaining a lot of steam. Is Jackson Andrews the new Mahomes Kelce stack?
It's not as outrageous as Kelsey Mahomes was. So I have the top 10 stacks. I did it because the volume's heavier in best ball. I pulled them from the best ball tourney. So Lamar Andrews is number one. 42% of the leagues have that stack. So that's pretty heavy. It was higher. It was over 50%, I think a week ago. So people maybe had slowed down on that. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown is 2 at 37%. Then you got Burrow Chase at 34, and then Mahomes Hollywood Brown is number 4. So people still like Mahomes, but Mahomes Kelsey's there. That's number 6 at 29%. So interestingly, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin is the number 5 stack.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
that's under the radar.
Well, and here's the thing, like when you look at the ADP for Daniels and McLaurin, of the ones we talked about, that might be one of the easier ones to have, right? Because
you can do that any draft you want.
Right, exactly. And that could pay off in spades too, if you want to do that. We'll get into Ben Sinnott in a little bit when we talk about Commanders, but I want to keep it on tight ends here and talk about Kyle Pitts, because this is a guy, I think Theo Greminger was just talking about this the other day. If you look back at Kyle Pitts' career being drafted in the FFPC, he's never been able to pay off his ADP because he was so high his rookie year, because people were like, this guy's going to revolutionize the position. He's going to be an unbelievable player. And then he did have a really good season, but it wasn't a transcendent first, second round, third round season or anything like that. And then, injuries and Arthur Smith and other things have gotten in his way. But Kyle Pitts right now is on a nice little bounce back. He is being drafted as tight end 6. Now Arthur Smith free. He gets Kirk Cousins throwing to him. And oh, by the way, Kirk Cousins threw a ton to TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. Pitts tight end 6 at 312. Now, is that too high? Would you not be comfortable drafting him? You might have the opportunity to draft Pitts at the end of the 3rd round tonight, Darren. But I don't know if you're on board with that ADP right now.
Well, people have always been looking for a reason every year. It's like to draft Pitts. Like they're looking for justification, and he's never paid off. This might be the year that he actually delivers on that ADP. Now, would I draft him? What do we got? 5 other guys in front of him that are also similarly priced. If you're going elite tight end, I probably would still want to have Andrews, Kelsey, or Laporta. If I'm going to invest in an early pick, because where Pitts goes, I can get a pretty awesome receiver there as well. So I may grab Pitt. Like if Pitts fell, I would grab him, but I don't know that I'm paying that price right there for Pitts. But I think this year, like in the past, I've been like, I'm not taking Pitts. He's way overpriced, but he may pay off that price this year, because there's still, people love Kyle Pitts. So go for it if you like it.
Yeah, go for it. Indeed. We're going to be talking Drake London and maybe a little bit of Kyle Pitts with Todd Burrows coming up at the bottom of the hour. So more Falcons conversation to come, but let's continue the tight end conversation here. Michael Mayer, Darren, back in, I don't know, whatever it was, late February, early March, round 10, round 11, round 12, maybe round 13. Couldn't really get him cheaper than that. Then the NFL draft happened at the end of April, and this guy plummeted to sometimes round 19, round 20. If we look at his ADP right now, Michael Mayer, 18-11 as tight end 33. And that's because one Brock Bowers was selected in the first round by the Las Vegas Raiders. Bowers is tight end 11 at the 704. Have you moved off of Michael Mayer? Is this guy a DND for you because of Bowers? Or maybe is there a little bit of value here with the former second round pick from 2023?
Well, in best ball, I've been drafting Michael Mayer quite a bit because I still think he's going to have some decent games. And then there's always the possibility that something like the Bowers doesn't deliver. But in redraft, you're not going to start Michael Mayer. So I'd be surprised if he's not even rostered in 100% of the leagues for Fantasy Pros. He might be like 60-70% ownership. Because it's as long as Bowers is in front of him, you're not going to be able to start that guy. Now, he was going in the 11th round in Fantasy Pros before Bowers got drafted. So, Bowers is, if you're going to be in on a Las Vegas tight end, you got to go Bowers. Now, do you want to pay? Like, you got Devontae Adams hogging all the targets.
Yeah.
And Jacoby Myers, he's going to get his too. So, I think Bowers is maybe a play for, if you take him, you're hoping for that second half burst. Maybe something maybe there. I don't know that he's going to get off to such a fast start. So again, if he slides, I might take him, but he wouldn't be a guy that I'm targeting because right now, other guys that you could take around Brock Bowers is Njoku, Goddard, Kittle.
Yeah.
And then Hawkins. I'm not drafting Hawkinson, but I mean, so there's established players that you can take instead of him.
Just real quick on Hawkinson. When does he come? Like, okay, so when he got hurt late last season, I'm like, God, he's off my draft board. I'm like, I hate that term, but I just felt like somebody else is going to take him before me next year. And then I was surprised, early, a couple of months ago, talking about, he's looking good and recovery. He's ahead of schedule, which is what you always say when you're coming off a torn ligament. Right. He's ahead of schedule. And now I think it was yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, I finally saw he may not be ready for week 1. And that's kind of what I thought this whole time was, this guy's not going to be ready for week 1. I don't even know if he plays this season, especially if the Vikings view 2024, beg your pardon, as a punt season, as a year that JJ McCarthy can get ready. Why bring TJ Hawkinson back? Like, to me, he could not be further away from what I'm doing at the tight end position this year. It sounds kind of like you're not interested in being in business with this player this year either.
Yeah, I mean, you figure he's a pup candidate for sure. But again, you got to keep in mind in this format, or even in the best ball tournament, you want those players who could explode that second half. So I think right now in Fantasy Pros, he's going.
I got the Mojo up right now, Mojo. Tight end 12 in Fantasy Pros at 806.
Yeah, so I think that's going to go up or down depending upon the news cycle. Like depending on what you hear. Like if it's still bad news, he's going to keep dropping. But people are out there still. They're willing to take shots. And like Nick Chubb is the same thing. Like right now, people are willing to roster him. And if suddenly like he comes back early, well, then you got a great deal. So people are drafting multiple teams. They're spreading their exposures out. They're trying to get a lot of different players and play those different scenarios because he might be a guy that you want. You're not going to draft him as your tight end 1, TJ Hawkinson.
No.
But
although
or maybe you do, but you're going to have maybe two, 3 viable, alternates, or you play the waiver wire, like, before the season starts and pick something, because you can always get a tight end. Like McBride last year was a guy who was a lot of the main event winner picked up Trey McBride. Right. And that was one of the key things. So it's not just a draft here. It's what you're going to do during the season. There's so many ways to have success.
Is there a Trey McBride type player at tight end this year that I don't want to say could be, picked up on the waiver wire, but maybe going outside the top 24 tight ends? I mean, I know that there's players out there. Think about Tucker Kraft in Green Bay, Jatavian Sanders in Carolina, We already mentioned Michael Mayer as well. I don't know. There's probably still some Greg Dulcich fans out there. Is there a this year's McBride at all?
There probably is, but there's one every year, and we never know who it is.
We never know.
And it could be one of your Green Bay buddies. I mean, those guys, they had some really nice games.
The thing is, in order for it to be one of those Packers, the other one has to have a significant injury.
Yeah.
Right. And it may even require another injury by one of the receivers, given how deep the receiving core is there. And Jordan Love is, and I shouldn't even say this, but I'm going to. Similar in the vein of Tom Brady, his favorite receiver is the open one, right?
Yeah.
Where he shows no discretion. You think about Aaron Rodgers' last couple of years in Green Bay, and his final game, or his Devontae Adams' final game, I think, in a Packers uniform. Aaron Rodgers would almost only exclusively throw to Devontae Adams, to the point when the game was on the line and he had Alan Lazard wide open over the middle for like a 20-yard gain and an easy first down. He threw into double coverage for Devontae Adams, and it didn't work out. But Jordan Love does not do
that's
that.
what happened. That's what happened for McBride. Ertz got hurt, and then there was, so that can happen. But you can't predict these injuries. So there's a lot of candidates, but it's that's why, again, it just kind of spread your exposures out and let the goodness happen to you. You don't always intend for it to happen when you're drafting.
Permar 99 chiming in. It's Conklin. No one is on him, Balky. And yeah, that's true. Now I wouldn't say no one is on him, because there are people that are starting to get on him. And Conklin, you do have to soak a 12th round pick in. Like, he's going in the middle of the draft. He's not going at the end of drafts anymore. Tyler Conklin going as tight end 18.
Yeah. You take a look at the chart. If you click on my ADP page, when you click on the players, you see the chart of what they've done all year. If you look at Conklin's chart, it's like it's skyrocketed. He was free, and now he's going in the 11th, 12th round. So people are on him.
People are definitely on him. People are on Fantasy Mojo as well. For anybody who is not familiar with FantasyMojo.com, I always pump it up on all my shows. I think it's a great, great tool for FFPC players to use. Can you tell the viewers tonight a little bit about why this is a really good resource if you're playing in the FFPC?
Yeah, so obviously the bread and butter is we have ADP for every format, every hybrid, every like 6 different dynasty formats, every best ball format, every classic, Fantasy Pros, Best Ball 28, Best Ball Slim, like every variety. We have the ADP, easily sortable. I mean, you use it, I think, on a lot of the shows, so it's very user friendly.
Totally.
Draft boards, every day we refresh the draft board, so you can literally go to any draft conducted by the FFPC this year, and it's on our site. It's sorted by date, by format. You go in there and you can see what people are doing in drafts. You can't see like the aggregates, but you can go to any particular draft. Like this draft will be on the website tomorrow. You can go in and see what the draft board looks like. It helps because ADP is just a draft board puts stuff into context for you. You can see how people are building teams. ADP is just their solitary data points, which may not mean as much. We have ADP draft boards as well. A lot of people like it in that format. But this week, in 3 days, main event drafts start. We'll have the main event ADP, and we'll have the main event draft boards. As soon as they start rolling, we'll have that up there too. But if people want to know more about Fantasy Mojo, there's a virtual tour on the front page. And there's testimonials, like anybody who's had big success in FFPC, typically they'll tell you the value of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you always pump it up as a preseason tool. I think the in-season stuff with the bidding and everything like that, I think that's a great tool to utilize as well as we go forward. And then obviously everything going on with the playoff challenge too.
Yep.
At the end of the season. That's always awesome, especially for people who want to look back on what happened the previous year or previous years. You can always go to FantasyMojo.com with your subscription and look that up in real time on demand. It is fantastic. You kind of teased a little bit about what you're doing at the 10 spot tonight. I know it kind of depends upon what's going on with the first 9 spots tonight. And I know you don't want to reveal a lot, but we will look forward to watching you draft tonight in about a half hour from the 10 spot. Until then, we will continue to follow you on X at Fantasy Mojo. We will subscribe at FantasyMojo.com. Darren Armani, thank you so much for everything you do. And thanks so much for being a part of the program and popping out a little early tonight. Good luck in the draft tonight, man.
All right. Thanks, Balky. Good talking to you.
Good talking to you as well. That's Darren Armani from FantasyMojo.com. Check him out over at Fantasy Mojo on the X as well. We are coming into the home stretch, ladies and gentlemen. 29 minutes and counting until we have live coverage of the 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship hardware draft, featuring some of the best in the business bludgeoning each other to try to win $1 million this year. We do have one more guest, and he is coming up right after the break. You know him from Sharp Football Analysis, the Run to Daylight podcast, and Best Ball NFL on the X. Todd Burrows will rejoin me to talk a little bit about his new confidence rating system, which I really want to get into with him as well. As everything is going on with the Fantasy Pros hard weight draft tonight as well. We'll get his thoughts on what he's going to be doing from his draft spot. Don't go anywhere. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on the Better Sports Network right after this.
Is Dynasty. And the place to play is myffpc.com. Go to myffpc, use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more. Now is the time to get in there and get set up with a startup draft. Now is the time, now that the rookies and everyone are set, because you can go in and you can start the draft. And, you draft your Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases. And now that we know where the rookies are and where they're landing, you get going on that. So you want to try and set a startup draft for this week coming up if you're not involved yet. So go get involved. Use the QR code here or use the promo code that's in the link in the description here and get yourself going on Dynasty so you can really enjoy these players and draft the players you believe in. If you like Michael Penix Jr., you got to play Dynasty because you got to wait for him, but the payoff is big. And same with like Persall and Jackson Smith and Jigba and all these guys. Get in and do that. And I'll tell you what, the orphan leagues over there that we've been talking about, those all got bought up. They're actually all sold. People from this show I know took over a bunch of them. So right now, startups is the way to go. That's the way to rock and roll. It is startup season. Startup season and rookie draft season. That's what's up. Get set up at myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more and give you a leg up. No dealing with chasing around your friends and making them pay dues and having your buddy be like, oh, dude, I got to quit the league because I got a dog and I can't pay attention no more and I don't want to do trades. Forget all that. You can play online, MyFFPC, high stakes, low stakes, whatever you want to do with experts. And if somebody leaves the league, it goes in that orphan pool and somebody picks it up. The league has never been disbanded on FFPC.com. That's directly from Eric Balkman over there has told me that. So that's what's up. Get set up.
Here's the thing. You can unlock all content for all sports, including annual draft guides right now with the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You're going to get one-on-one expert access in Discord. You can sync up your leagues and analyze matchups and trends in your specific leagues. Generate lineups with that are integrated with FanJections, and of course, daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value vaults, their position coaches, to waiver wire ownership percentages, projection stats, and tools. Build better lineups guaranteed with the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. Everything that Fantasy Alarm offers all year long, just use promo code LOCK at fantasyalarm.com/lock. That's LOCK. You can also scan the QR code that is on your screen right now. We are 25 minutes and change away from the annual 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship hardware draft, featuring 12 of the toughest drafters out there, which we will be able to watch right after we get done with the pregame here, right here on the Better Sports Network. Aiden LaCour and Dave Terpoli from the FFPC will have live pick-by-pick coverage for you, along with interviews with some of the drafters tonight as well. That's going to be all right here on the Better Sports Network. I want to welcome in my final guest for the evening, the anchor of this relay. He is famous for his Run to Daylight podcast. You know him from Sharp Football Analysis, and you know him by following him on the X at Best Ball NFL. Please welcome back on to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, Mr. Todd Burrows. Todd, welcome in, man.
Balky, you look like you're mountain man. It's like it's almost summer, dude. It's time to end the hibernation.
Yeah,
and to come out of the cave.
I may do that, and actually, I said that to my wife because my wife is no fan of my beard. I said to her the other day because I kind of like it.
I find that shocking, by the way.
Oh yeah, I know. Yes, it's great for the Wisconsin winters here because I feel nothing when I go outside because I got my own Gore-Tex jacket right on my face. But yeah, I said to her the other day, I said, maybe it is time to shave it off and go forward and enjoy the summer. I haven't made that decision yet, but we'll see what happens here going forward.
I just gave you a little push in the right direction, Balky. Always willing to help out wives across the country, since I no longer have one.
Dom, there you go. Yes, thank you, Todd. And I'm sorry to hear that, but I do appreciate the advice for you. Dom Gazzetti, too much cake will get caught in that thing, Balky. Yeah, stuff has gotten caught in it over the years for sure. Nobody cares about the beard. Let's move on and talk about Tony Pollard, Todd, because
but first we got to say it's a big night, Balky.
Well, how big is it, Todd? How jacked up are you for this draft?
I was excited all day. I plotted out the first 3 rounds. I'm just a humble best ball guy. I'm not a season-long grinder. I'm just a humble best ball guy. But I've actually done better in season-long than best ball. Definitely last year. And the year before that, I had one FFPC team coming 4th in the tournament. Mm-hmm. But I had really good season-long results. Came in 2nd in the regular season in the hard-way draft, which for a humble best ball guy is not much of a humble brag. It's a full-out brag.
It's a full-out brag.
But I couldn't take it home. I got Amari Coopered in the semifinals. I put up like 170 points and still lost. Would have cruised in week 18, but we're back for another try. With a lot of the guys who are the best in the business, and I'm looking forward to competing. As far as Mr. Pollard goes,
yes.
What's your question?
Well, okay, so let's talk about Pollard because this is a player that I think was miscast in his role in Dallas last year a little bit. I know a lot bit. He was hurt, and he was playing not fully recovered from that nasty injury he had at the end of 2022. And he himself said, like, in December, he started finally feeling like, okay, now I'm ready to go. I feel like I'm fully recovered. And that's sort of when he had his best games. Then he doesn't resign with Dallas. He goes to Tennessee, which to me they're kind of revamping their team to being a passing team. With Will Levis, DeAndre Hopkins, they went out and signed Calvin Ridley. They still have Treylon Burks. They signed Tyler Boyd, and then they get the pass catcher, Tony Pollard, to be on this team as well. Is he in for a nice little bounce back year this year, Todd? Because you don't have to pay a ton to get him right now in drafts.
No, but the thing is that in general, the running back market has collapsed even further. Not as much on the FFPC, but on other sites, but even on the FFPC. So, Tony Pollard is a mixing guy for me, not a Joe Mixon guy. He is a guy that I will mix in. And but I have more interest a couple rounds later in Tajay Spears, who I famously had about 35% of last year, and Derrick Henry stayed annoyingly healthy. But I think Pollard is fairly priced, and I think it would, the pro case for Tony Pollard is that he was injured last year, that tightrope surgery. The negative is that he is, explosive guys. Once they lose their explosion, it's hard to get it back. And he definitely didn't look as explosive last year.
I think that's the thing too. It's just like we don't want to include recency bias, but it's hard not to. And if you are going to, fortune favors the bold. And if you are bold enough to draft Tony Pollard, I'm going to look up his ADP right now. Running back 29 at the 806. I mean, this is Raheem Mostert, Jaylen Warren, Austin Eckler territory. Maybe you don't even have to be that bold to draft him there.
No, that's my point. My point is, Austin Eckler was a first-round pick last year, and now, he was hurt too, right? Mm-hmm. He's just a little bit older than Pollard. Montgomery, everyone assumes that Jahmyr Gibbs is going to take over more of the role this year. He probably will. But my point is all those guys are viable for different builds. In best ball, I've taken both Pollard and Spears on the same team because something I call stack huffing, because they both should be able to pay off their ADP individually. but if one of them gets hurt, the other one could crush ADP, right?
Yes.
So I think, again, that's not something I do regularly, but it is a tool in the toolbox. And I think, there are some really smart analysts. I did a pod with Rich Rebar, Lord Reeves, last week. He was hyping up Tennessee offense. My buddy Mark Garcia, high-low, same thing. We did a pod. He was talking about Tennessee. And, the weapons are super cheap still. So I think that that offense is going to get some steam as we get closer. And as other smart people start saying there's too much talent here for them to be a bad offense. And the funny thing is, you talked about recency bias. Even when the schedule came out, and I'm looking at other teams who played Tennessee the last couple of weeks, and my first thought was, that the Tennessee's not a good matchup. And then I'm like, wait a second. I agree with Permar 99 at this point. I love Tajay Spears.
Saying
And
Spears is better than Pollard.
I think they're about even, and Spears is younger, right? And Spears is a big play waiting to happen, just like Pollard used to be. But I don't think you can discount the fact that Pollard could be that again. Anyway, I do think that there's this bias that Mike Vrabel is still there, and he's not. Yeah. And the two biggest opportunities in coaching changes is the Atlanta offense and the Tennessee offense. And people were sleeping on Atlanta pre-draft, and then they signed Kirk Cousins, and then everyone was like, oh, yeah, this could be a really different situation. So, those are my thoughts on the Titans.
By the way, Mr. Bakes-a-Lot chiming in on the YouTube chat, where the live in-person drafts jumping off on FFPC. We will have our live events once again September 5th through the 7th over at Planet Hollywood. So make your reservations now. In fact, if you go to the myffpc.com page and click on main event, then scroll to the bottom, there's actually a link that you can register and book your room right on there right now as well. So check that out. myffpc.com or scan the QR code on our page. Let's talk about the Saints running backs. We just talked about Tennessee. We'll go a little bit south to New Orleans. Kendre Miller. Is he actually the Saints running back, Todd? If you're going to have one of them on your teams this year, is he the Saints running back that you want to own? And I'll preface this by saying Alvin Kamara is running back 14 at the 412 right now in Fantasy Pros Championship leagues. Kendre Miller, running back 41, not being drafted until the 10-10. Your thoughts on this situation, my friend?
I don't think he'll last that long tonight. I don't want to let any cat out of the bag, but this is a draft where you can throw your ADP out the window, and a lot of smart people are on Kendre Miller. So I want to talk a little bit more about an overall strategy and a failing of mine that that I've been addressing a little bit last year and more this year, which is if you're fading someone, who is going, double up on if you're right. So there's a lot of running back values. Alvin Kamara was not as efficient last year. Beyond everything else, he just wasn't as efficient. So if he's going to fail, who's likely to benefit from that? If Alvin Kamara gets hurt, who's likely to benefit from that? So if you believe in Kamara, I still think taking some Kendre Miller makes a lot of sense. If you're fading Alvin Kamara, I think you should be doubling down and owning a lot of Kendre Miller so that, one of those two guys is probably going to have a good year. And so don't avoid both of them because it was a bad offense last year. They also brought in a new offensive coordinator, and that, I expect that offense to be better this year.
I think so too, and I think and Jamal Williams is still there, right, Todd?
He is, and they're saying Taysom Hill's been running out of the running back spot.
Yes.
So I mean, it's easy to get discouraged on the Saints backfield. I like it a lot better for best ball than I do for season long. I don't like situations where I'm going to start Kendre Miller, and 1 week he gets me 22 points, and the next week he gets me 4. I mean, even if Kamara goes down, Taysom Hill could be the guy. So I think people mock the whole thought of, well, that's a best ball. I like him for best ball. They act like it's a cop out. It's not a cop out. Maybe some people are copping out, but I'm certainly not. Season long, I look for different portfolios. I either want someone who's going to be a starter or someone who, if the starter gets hurt, is going to come into a large workload, not someone like Kendra Miller, who still has Jamal Williams and Taysom Hill there. So will I avoid him tonight? Maybe. But I'm not as high on him for season long as I am for best ball. But best ball, I own a lot of Kendra Miller.
You'll be drafting in about 13 minutes here, Todd. I do want to get into a few players that you are exercising caution on this year, and we'll start off with none other than Puka Nacua, a guy who was undrafted in a couple of leagues last year. He went for buku bucks on the waiver wire, in the preseason waiver wire. You look at where he's being drafted this year, it's radically different for Nacua. When you look at him this year, he is being drafted as wide receiver 6 at the 111. Why do we need to exercise caution on drafting him this year?
Well, I mean, you've got a older quarterback who's had a history of injuries. And there was talk of him having to retire because of those injuries before last year. And Cooper Kupp was hurt all last year, played through injury. So to me, he is being drafted near his ceiling. And I don't like drafting players at their ceiling. So when you look at him going ahead of A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, okay, so let's talk about my rankings. I know you wanted to talk about them.
Yep.
Best ball confidence rankings are basically, I was asked by Sharp Football to do just rankings like everyone else does. And I said, I really don't want to. I don't really think they help people to draft best ball. I said, but I've got this idea. I've got this idea for something. And then we kicked around names, and I think Ray Summerlin threw out confidence rankings, or maybe I did. But either way, 50% of the players are neutral, which means if you're on the clock when they're there, they're fine to take. I have about 5% are either targets or avoids. And both of them are 2 tiers I feel mispriced. Okay. That's why there's so few of them, because ADP is pretty efficient. And then there are targets. Values and cautions. And basically those aren't guys I'm avoiding, but I'm really only drafting them when I'm stacking them, correlating them, or they fall a little bit in ADP. Okay. And that helps you to really understand how and when to build a best ball portfolio. And so with Puka Nacua, he is my, him and Amon-Ra St. Brown, these are underdog rankings. And Amon-Ra St. Brown has passed both Bijan and Breece Hall. And I think that merits a caution at that ADP. And I think Puka, I don't think he's mispriced terribly, but I think he's mispriced by 5 to 7 picks. So, I'm not avoiding him, but right now I'll be significantly underweight on him. Love the player, just don't like the ADP.
Can you draw some similarities? I mean, is that the same reason why Drake London might fall into the same camp with you as a caution pick?
Correct. Drake London was going in the 4th round, and then they signed Kirk Cousins. Now he's going early 2nd round. Very good player. He might pay that off, but I think there are guys much later who give me a lot of what I can get from Drake London. If he falls 4 or 5 picks, or every once in a while, I'll just take Drake London, because there's not a lot of value in that early 2nd to mid 2nd round. So, it's kind of tough. It's kind of at times kind of hold your nose and take someone. But you also then have to have a plan of what you're going to do with him later. 9
minutes and change until we go live here with the Fantasy Pros Hardway draft for 2024. Todd Burrows, who was a semifinalist in this league last season, joining us tonight. And I'm going to ask you this. I genuinely don't know how you feel about Michael Pittman, but Pittman, wide receiver 13 at the 305. He's not at the polarizing level yet, but it seems like he's on his way there, where a lot of people like him, a lot of people don't like him, and there's not much in the middle. How do you feel about Michael Pittman at that ADP right now in the Fantasy Pros Championship, Todd?
A little too high for me. Again, I'll talk about Lord Reeves, Rich Rebar. We did a podcast. He talked about it. Just how inefficient running quarterbacks have trouble feeding even their 1A wide receiver, which Michael Pittman is. So I love Anthony Richardson, but if you look at how good Josh Downs was before he got hurt, and then you've got an explosive rookie, I just think that I am more comfortable being underweight on Michael Pittman in best ball. And I think he's a little bit better in season long because he will get targets every week. But and there will be big plays. But I've gone with Lord Reeves on this one, and I just am I'm cautious on Michael Pittman at ADP.
Yeah, I think the thing with Pittman is he's more of a floor type player. I don't think he's going to electrify anybody with like big time explosive plays. But I do know they focused on him a lot. But you have Anthony Richardson coming back, who likes to use his legs, and they add AD Mitchell and I think that there are certain things that enough. I don't want to say red flags, but let's say pink flags.
59% completion percentage for Anthony Richardson. Short sample size,
right?
But and Rich Rebar did again a really good analysis that Michael Pittman's catch percentage with. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was about 10 to 15% higher completion percentage on targets with Gardner Minshew than with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah,
that is something to be cautious about. And third round pick, I want floor and ceiling. I don't want a floor player in the third round.
Yes.
In best ball, I don't want a floor player in season long all the more. The only time I might consider it is if I'm planning on stacking him occasionally. If he falls a little bit, like I said, because you want to have some ownership in case you're wrong. So if he falls 5, 6, 7 spots, yeah, I'll take him. Okay. And then, but in general, I feel like Josh Downs, it was really very, very good. Matt Harmon had good grades on Josh Downs. And I think the difference in ADP leads me to Downs.
It's been said, Todd, that the Green Bay Packers do not have a number one receiver. And in fact, if we look at the Fantasy Mojo ADP on this, Jaden Reed is the highest drafted Packers receiver at wide receiver 36. That's at the end of the 6th round. Christian Watson going in the mid-8th, Romeo Doubs at the end of the 12th. But I wonder, and sometimes you say when there's not a number one running back, not a number one receiver, take the guy who's being drafted last. And right now that's Dontavian Wicks, wide receiver 60 in the early 13th round. I've seen people saying he is going to be the number one receiver for the Packers. Are we letting him slip too far in Fantasy Pros drafts right now?
I mean, he's one of my most owned players in early best ball and late best ball. He's just too talented. And, again, Lord Reeves got me on Christian Watson. I was off him because of the hamstrings, but he's too explosive. So Jaden Reed was off the field a lot when everyone was healthy last year. So Wicks has obstacles but he is also talented enough to be the number one guy there. But at his ADP, he doesn't have to be. Mm-hmm. and that's the beautiful thing. So sometimes in these situations, I'm always willing to bet on talented guys who are blocked or are perceived to be blocked, because those are the guys who can win you championships.
I think that there's no there's no downside in drafting Wicks, best ball or a Fantasy Pros Championship League. There's no downside in drafting Wicks. Again, he's one of these guys. I talked about this with Jaylen Rice.
He's going to go. I'm sorry.
Well, he will rise up. He will rise. You're right. He will rise up.
You will see him go, my guess, 2 rounds before he normally does today. There's enough people who like him in this room, including one guy who I won't call out because that's not fair, who was touting him literally from day one last year. I don't expect Dontavian Wicks to come in anywhere near his ADP tonight.
Todd, we talked about this earlier in the show about how with Darren Armani, like there's just nobody left the last 5-6 rounds of this draft, but yet you guys always seem to come up with some pretty shrewd picks, some sleepers that end up paying off. Do you have a favorite late round running back that you keep coming back to this year and loop in your best ball experience?
I will tell you that the guy that I've been drafting the most of lately is Elijah Mitchell. He's going 5-6 rounds later than he did last year. His role is a little more precarious because they drafted Gorendo, whose tape I didn't like. And I love him in best ball, especially when I take somebody, let's say you have the 2, 3, or 4, McCaffrey's going 1. We see this kind of seesaw effect where if a first-round pick gets hurt, the other first-round picks right near him get a huge boost, right? His advance rate is going to drop tremendously, and so the guys drafted near him are going to get a boost. Yeah. So I like doubling down. Remember how I talked earlier about doubling down if you're right? Well, when you don't have the 1-1, it's not that you're right, but you have to act like you're right. You have to act. If you get the number 2 and you take Lamb or Tyreek Hill or Chase, if you take one of those guys, you have to act as if you're right. And then if you add Elijah Mitchell, CMC goes down. Now you've got almost the equivalent of the top 2 or 3 guys in the whole draft on one team. And that's really going to be hard to beat. So I hate giving away a freebie before the draft, but I've been taking a lot of Elijah Mitchell in best ball lately.
And that's good stuff. Todd, 30 seconds out the door on this question. Better late round Chargers wide receiver pick, DJ Chark or Brendan Rice?
Oh, I mean, DJ Chark is a guy who hasn't been the same in 4 or 5 years. Again, it depends on what you want for season long, right? If you want a guy who's just going to be able to fill in a bye week, maybe Chark. But Chark hasn't shown an upside in 3 years, 4 years. Give me Brendan Rice. Let me take a shot on hitting a home run. If it's a 0, in best ball, it hurts you a little bit. In season long, you waiver him out and you try again. So give me Brendan Rice 10 out of 10 times.
And I will give you Best Ball NFL on X 10 out of 10 times as far as one of the follows that you need to be making sure you're following if you're a high-stakes player. Drafting in the 4 spot tonight, sandwiched between last year's champ Theo Greminger and John Daigle, a guest earlier in the program tonight. Todd, we will continue to follow you at Best Ball NFL. Thanks so much for being a part of this broadcast. Good luck tonight, man.
Thank you. I'm going to need it.
That's Todd Burrows at Best Ball NFL. Check him out there as well as his Run to Daylight podcast and all the work he's doing for Sharp Football Analysis. That's going to do it. We're less than a minute away, people. Thanks to Dan Williamson, John Daigle, Darren Armani, Todd Burrows, our producer, Matt Deutsch. We're back at our normal 7 p.m. Eastern time start next Thursday. Sports Gambling Podcast, Ryan Kramer will be my guest co-host. Check out the Fantasy Pros Championship. The FFPC main event early bird flies away at midnight Pacific time tomorrow. Save $100 getting that Pros versus Joe's drawing when you sign up right now. The FFPC Best Ball Tournament, Superflex Best Ball Tournament, Empire Leagues, and Dynasty Leagues, all available at myffpc.com. Aiden LaCourie and Dave Tripoli are on the call for the 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship Hardway Draft. Theo Greminger from Player Profiler, your defending champ, your runner-up, Austin Martin. They're going to be going at it tonight. A ton of guys, Abib Egbatoba, the Go Bills franchise, John Daigle, the Deep End Fantasy Podcast guys, Mike Shope and Adam Krautwurst. We're talking Noah Riddell in this, Fantasy Mojo's Darren Armani, Davis Maddock, David Hubbard, the 2016 FFPC main event champion, along with Mark Garcia. I love fantasy. It is going to be a bloodbath, and you are going to enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll kick it over to Terp and Aiden right now. We'll be back next week at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Enjoy the draft.